Hello again, gamers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Captain, and today I'm going to be reviewing and talking about a little indie role-playing game called Vast Grimm. So Vast Grimm is a game that has been published by Creature Curation and Infinite Black, and it is based on the Mork Borg symbol. As you can see there, it says compatible with Mork Borg. So I want to give a big thank you to the publishers of this game for this free review copy they gave me to be able to check out and play with and read, as well as film some content with. So thank you guys. Also, I want to say before we get too into this, I do got a ton of links in the description down below that you can check out at your leisure. There's a link to BoardGameCaptain.com, which is a great hub for all things Board Game Captain. There's also a link to my Teespring store, where you can get some cool Board Game Captain merch, and a link to my Patreon if you're in a position to and would like to support the channel. All right, so Vast Grimm. Now, what is this? So this is a kind of sci-fi dystopian role-playing game based off of the rules and feel of Mork Borg. So Mork Borg, if you're not familiar, I did do a review of Mork Borg. I'm going to put a card up above here so you can check out that review. That is a rules light, very nihilistic dystopian fantasy game, whereas this is a dystopian spacefaring game where you're flying around the solar system while the universe is going to be ending. In that one, you're in a fantasy world, and the world is going to be ending. But this one does have a little bit of an out, so a little bit less of the nihilism, which I do really like, actually. I like there to be a limit to nihilism in games, because otherwise it feels like, what's the point if you're going to be completely nihilistic, which was one of my gripes I did have with Mork Borg. Spoiler alert, if you haven't watched that review, I did like the game, but I did have some issues with it. So let's start by opening this up, talking about it, showing what comes inside. So first off, it is a small hardcover book, which has a nice old school thread binding and a cloth bookmark here, which I really like. Now inside this book, the art style, and I'm going to be showing a lot of pictures of it up on the screen here, similar to Mork Borg, they took a cue from that where they did a lot of full page art behind the text, and this has this incredibly retro futuristic 80s feel. If you were alive in the 80s, you know that there was a lot of sci-fi in that time period that had this interesting dark and edgelord, but still bright and neon kind of feel to it. A weird kind of contradiction in terms, but still amazing. And this book captures that really well. On the same page, you will have bits that seem incredibly dark and gritty, and then other bits that are bright and colorful and filled with neon lights. Now, the first thing you see when you open up this book is you have tables on the inside cover, just like its parent, Mork Borg. And I like that they have this, since this is a very rules-like game that you're not going to ever have really a Game Master screen for. And on both the inside front and inside rear cover, we have tables, and in the case of the rear cover, also an index to help you find certain rules. Now, after we get past the tables on the inside front cover, we have the total credits. Now, I'm going to show these credit pages up front here. But the big takeaways is that the writing and game design and graphics were by Brian Collin and Ross Brandt. But there were a lot of other people involved, especially with the artwork and editing, etc. And I'm going to show this all up on the screen so you can see everybody. Once we get past that, we have the bit of story. The short version of the story is that some evil cultists in the future find this ancient dark temple on a planet in the solar system, and they open it up, and doing so, they release this apocalyptic force that is taking over people and slowly bringing about the end of humanity. Now, you are playing in this universe where some people are futilely trying to fight against it. You can go kind of similar to Mork Borg and just sort of be nihilistic and just sort of, party and loot and go on adventures while the world is going to end. But there actually is, storyline-wise, I'm not going to ruin what, but there is something that pops open that gives you a glimmer of hope, where you get to make a decision on at least you could save yourselves, or sometimes you might have a storyline where you sacrifice yourselves to save infinite other universes from the same fate. All of this is in my opinion, storyline-wise, even though it stays still fairly story-light and relies on the Game Master for a lot of it, just like Mörk Borg did, this bit of storyline makes this game infinitely more interesting to me because there is goals to work towards that are spelled out, whereas in Mörk Borg, it's like, you know, maybe you could try to avert the apocalypse. We don't know how you would do that. And it kind of says that to you. In this, they kind of are like, well, here's some ideas. Here's some ways to maybe not avert the apocalypse, but maybe get out of it yourself, or maybe just stop for future apocalypses from happening to other universes. Now, then we have a description of a lot of the big locations in the universe, which is very important to have a brief description of all these locations because you're going to go adventuring on these different worlds and asteroids and moons and such. Next, we have a section where it is called The Endings, Scrolled in Blood, the Fatuma. These are things that slowly, there are rules for them, slowly things in the universe change in very dark and gritty and almost Book of Revelations kind of ways as the apocalypse is coming. This is very similar, and they had a very similar system in Mörk Borg, obviously based off of that. You know the end of this kind of prophetic end of the universe is coming, and these are sort of like the seven seals being broken for the apocalypse in a way. These are really cool, and they have a lot of very interesting effects on the actual game, because each one of these, when they happen, become a new rule about how the universe is as things are getting worse and it's heading towards destruction. Now, next we have character creation. I have a little bit of a gripe here. I would have liked them to explain the rules before character creation, but this is a minor gripe. The rules are afterwards. But the basics of character creation is you're going to select a class, or you can randomly roll one. Then you follow the class instructions for equipment, armor, and weapons. Then you roll for your abilities, because like Mörk Borg, that is totally random. You roll for your hit points. You roll personality traits on the tables. You randomly acquire starting equipment. You spend some of your credits to buy some other equipment. And you give your character a name, though it will quickly be forgotten once they are infected by the Grimm. The Grimm are these worm-like creatures that infect people and eventually take them over and turn them into forces that are working for the apocalypse, working towards destroying everything. And it is very likely that you will have multiple characters while playing this game that get infected and die, or just die while you are playing. This is the sort of game where you're going to want to have multiple backup characters, because characters will die in this. Just like Mörk Borg, it is a very lethal system. Now, the first character type we have is the machine, or the man-sheen. The man-sheen is a cyborg, essentially. Then we have the lost technomaniac, followed by the twisted biochemist, the treacherous merc, the emo-bots, it's kind of funny, the devout, the harvester. And after we get past all those character classes, we have the extra tables for rolling on your background and your scars and all sorts of abilities and things like that. Now, something interesting about the character classes in this, while they do cover a lot of the standard types of classes you would expect to see, there are fighter types and technology-based types and sneaky types and things like that, but there are a lot in here where you read them and you're like, this seems like this class is meant to be a bad guy. Like, this game is obviously meant to be possibly morally ambiguous, or possibly a game where you have the discussions of different moral outlooks and the debates and actually explore that in the game, which can be very interesting if you play it right. But you have to know what you're getting into in regard to this kind of vicious end of the universe sort of game. I do like these kind of, dystopian end of the world, end of the universe scenarios, but you have to do it right. And I feel like, spoiler alert, I feel like they did do it right with this one. I actually do feel like the feel is an upgrade from Mörk Borg. I liked Mörk Borg, and this is, again, a spoiler for the end of this video, but I like this better than Mörk Borg, better than the source material. So the Battle Scars table and the Misspent Youth table are really interesting, as is the irritating idiosyncrasies. You roll up random weird things about yourself, and you can wind up with all sorts of weird tics and scars and things. And these are really great for fleshing out your character. Then they have equipment and buying equipment, rolling up random equipment, that kind of thing. They have rules for encumbrance, which are very easy because, again, this system is fairly rules light. They have favors, which can be really interesting because favors can let you deal maximum damage with an attack, or let you re-roll dice, or lower damage dealt to you by the roll of a d6, or you can cancel out a crit that was done to you, or a fumble that you did to someone else, or lower the one test damage resistance by a -4. These favors are really useful. These are spendable attributes that you can spend to do any of these things. You do regain your favors each time you rest, though, so it is a stat that you get basically those number of favors between rests. So essentially, in most games, you should probably have those number of favors for a single game. Next, we have the powers that be. Also underneath Neuromancy, which is fun reference to the old book Neuromancer. This is basically the system's magic, but it's more technology based. It works similar to a magic system, but it's basically your ability to use super advanced tech to do effects that are kind of like spell effects, but you know that old rule about any technology sufficiently advanced would be indistinguishable from magic. You know, I believe it was Arthur C. Clarke who said that. Yeah, and that makes sense with this because you are using like nanotech and super advanced programs to do very interesting things. Next, we have the advancement system. So the advancement system allows you to gain extra abilities and then to roll dice to check on your stats. And the interesting thing is your stats, similar to how it works in Mork Borg, don't automatically just go up. You have to roll. Some of them will go up, some of them will go down. It's not necessarily a full-on leveling up system. It's just sort of it's just a change system. Basically, the lower your stat is, the more likely it is to improve. The higher it is, the more likely it is to stay the same or even reduce back down. Then we have the rules on how combat works. I'm not going to go too deep into this because it's all the same as the Mork Borg system that I already covered. We have rest and reaction, morale. We have pharmaceuticals, which have a bunch of performance-enhancing drugs that even have addiction effects, keeping with the super gritty nature of this universe. And these are really interesting, and they have a section on how to deal with the addiction and how that all works. Then we have the hacked tributes. These are like effects that you can use technology-based that are kind of like spells. We have lots of effects on the tributes. We have Becoming the Grimm, which this is if you get infected with one of these worms, which these worms are all controlled by this like hive mind that is destroying the universe. Basically, you start with it as a parasite, slowly harming you, and eventually it might kill you. You also have a slim chance of surviving being infected by one of these worms, but most likely it's going to kill you and then turn you into one of the Grimm. However, there are many types of worms. There is the carnivorous or flesh worm. There is the cruer or bloodworm. There is the Nurok or brain worm. There is the Ramathus or heartworm. There is the rot or gut worm, and there's the Turgis or spinal worm. And each of these have these crazy tables with the effects that the worm may have on you recently. And there are some where you get to fight off the effects, and if you do that enough, if you randomly roll that enough, you might actually survive the experience. But there's others where you have these crazy game affecting effects depending on where the worm is in your body and what type of worm it is that affect you for the entirety of the game. And eventually, if you get enough of the negative effects, what's going to happen is you will die and become a NPC villain, servant of the evil forces, after which you need to make a new character or grab one of your sheets from one of your extra characters you have already made, which I highly recommend that you start out with actually creating extra characters for this game. You will want spares. Next, we have an optional D20 roll. There's a lot of optional rolls in here, but I feel like you should do them all because they're great, and really it's not that hard of a system even with all the optional rolls. But this one gives you a background about who is your group and why are they together and what happened to them, because there was like a war fought against the legions the enemy, but you lost. You lost. They're taking over. It's become inevitable. There's still some futilely fighting them, but were you part of that war? Like, did you run away? Did your force get wiped out? What is the situation? Then we have a table for Cataclysmic Condemnations. This is an amazing table for things go wrong when using tributes. It's similar to the miscast table from Mörk Borg in that just all sorts of weird random stuff can happen. Then they have an optional random ship. If you'd like to start your group with a ship, you can roll for what ship they start with. Ships are really interesting in this, but they're all broken down junkers. The ships in this, and you can see the picture here, reminds me a lot of the Firefly. But they're all like falling apart constantly because the universe is, society in general and government is breaking down. There's nobody to really repair your ship when it breaks anymore. So things are falling apart, and you constantly, when traveling with your ship, have to actually take tests to see if it's actually still working or if you break down in the middle of space between planets. Then we have a bunch of enemies you can run into, including wild animals, astro zombies, big worms, which are worms that after bursting out of people become enormously large. The syphilite, which is like an enormous space traveling monstrosity. You have the Grimm, which these are the people, like if players get infected by the worms and eventually taken over, these are what they turn into. Those are the Grimm. You have a Ragebot, which is a old military robot that's trying to kill everything it comes in contact with. We have the Salazarite and the Sludge, which are strange monstrosities you can run into, and the Void Remnant, and all of these things, they're enemies. Some of them are intelligent. Many of them can infect you with the worms because many of them have been infected already themselves. Then we have quick rules, which has a lot of quick reference to important bits and rules here. This is a good part to bookmark. And then finally, we have Death Aboard the Conundrum, an introductory adventure for Vast Grimm. This is a decent introductory adventure, and I feel gives you a really good, in my opinion, really good idea, whether you use the adventure or not, just if you read it, a really good idea on how to run a game in Vast Grimm. And this is important because, similar to Mörk Borg, this book does not have a section on how to roleplay, how to be a game master. While it is rules light, they expect that you've already role-played and this is not your first role-playing game. After that, we have a big table of adventure sparks. So you could roll random sparks to figure out, figure out randomly what kind of adventure to run. They have who contacts you to start an adventure, where do you want to go to, who or what dwells there now, etc. A bunch of tables to help you randomly put together an adventure. And finally, we're to the back cover where we have the, again, some more tables in the rear cover. All right, so rules-wise, this goes very much like Vast Grimm, but it feels like an improvement to me. Now, you're playing in a very different universe because this is a spacefaring sci-fi universe, but functionally it plays very similarly. You know the universe is ending. You know there's probably not a lot you can do about stopping it, but then as a big improvement to this one over Mörk Borg, in my opinion, you do get a couple of things you could do to still kind of have a positive ending. In Mörk Borg, it sort of was really that there was not going to be a positive ending. Eventually, the universe was just going to end. In this, there is at least the possibility of when the universe ends, you may find a way out of it, or when the universe ends, you can die as heroes saving countless other universes. Now, I'm not going to ruin how that is in case you play this game, so I'm not going to tell you how you could do either of those options. And you know what? Your game master could even come up with other options to present to you, or your players may come up with other options that tell you as the game master how they're gonna do something else, but they lay some groundwork in here that very instantly made me think of those as two possible things that could happen by the end of your game, which makes the ending of a Vast Grimm self-contained campaign more satisfying to me than one of Mörk Borg. As much as I liked Mörk Borg, I like Vast Grimm more. I think this is actually an improvement on the game. They took the basic skeleton of Mork Borg and upgraded it, in my opinion. So yeah, I really do like this a lot. So I'm going to give Vast Grimm 8 out of 10 stars because I do thoroughly like it and I do recommend it. And also, FYI, while you do not need Mork Borg to play this, you can just buy this. I do not recommend it as your first role-playing game. This is the sort of game that you should have already role-played a bit and understand how it works before getting this, even though it's not a super advanced system. It's a very easy system to play. Again, there is no section in here to hold your hand and teach you how to role-play, how to game master. Most of that is something you should already be vaguely familiar with. You should have at least played in one role-playing group before jumping into this. But that said, yeah, I do recommend this. I think this is really cool. So let me know in the comments down below what you think of Vast Grimm if you've tried it out, or what you thought of my review. And if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see me do more reviews of role-playing games and role-playing game products like this, be sure to give this video a like, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.